to the Shoes of CMO, the podcast where we speak with the people shaping how modern brands connect, grow, and stay relevant. Today's episode is a rare one. I'm joined by Donovan Neale-May. Donovan is a marketing heavyweight whose work spans 5 decades. He's worked across continents and multiple campaigns for large brands like Dell, Avis, General Foods, Subaru, and Tabasco. He also leads the CMO Council, a global network of over 16,000 senior marketers worldwide. From agency side to boardrooms, from brand rescue missions to the rise of digital, Donovan's seen it all. And in this conversation, he shares the lessons, the war stories, and the why behind it all. Welcome, Donovan. Thank you very much for joining the show. I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Great. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Are you working on anything exciting at the moment?
Everything is exciting when it comes to working with chief marketing officers. And as far as I'm concerned, it's really about how we can elevate the role of chief marketing officers and do that globally, not just locally.
Anything make you super happy this week or brighten up your day?
It's 100 degrees here in Las Vegas right now, and I've managed to get out on Lake Mead and paddle my surf ski twice this week, early in the morning before it gets to be 100 degrees.
Wow. I hope you're wearing a good sunscreen, though, when you're out there.
I have my cowboy hat. That's what you wear here. You get accepted better.
Okay. You'll have to show us later on in the show your hat, if you have it with you.
I have got one.
So, Donovan, your career is quite impressive. It spans over 5 decades in marketing. I want to start off with some questions around your career and your progression. How did you get started in marketing? Where have you worked over the last 50 years?
After I left the university in South Africa, where I grew up, I spent time studying journalism. I got the opportunity to then play professional rugby in Italy. Arrived in Rome, and I sat waiting to be greeted by the Italians, and I waited, and I thought, well, obviously, things don't run fast here. And then this old entourage arrived, and they were going to greet me as a professional rugby player in the south of Italy in a place called Reggio Calabria. But unfortunately, because I came from South Africa, they were looking for a black person. And it turned out that that wasn't who I was. So anyway, that was the entry to the world of craziness of Italian rugby for 3 years. Then I went to London, and that was another dream. I got an opportunity to start in business there with a marketing agency in Chelsea off the King's Road. And it was all about, my client at that time was Avis Rent-A-Car. It was a big campaign they were launching called We Try Harder. And that was to compete against Hertz.
You've held senior roles at agencies like Ogilvy, Mather in Silicon Valley, in Los Angeles, New York, London. How did these experiences shape your approach to marketing?
I left London and I went to New York. I joined an agency that was 120 years old. They were primarily PR and promotions at the time. And the opportunity there was we diversify their business. They had a lot of food accounts. They had a tremendous amount of commodity marketing business, promoting consumption and usage of different food items. There was New Zealand lamb, there was Tabasco sauce, all these hallmark brands, Florida citrus. So these are branded commodities that this agency was particularly adept at handling. I came in, and my account for the first account was Subaru of America, which had just arrived in America. And Subaru had small little cars that nobody knew anything about. And so we started a variety of different initiatives to try to get brand recognition, awareness, and an association with something that would be differential and distinctive for that brand. And of course, one of the distinctive elements of Subaru is the bi-drive capability of its cars, very reliable, very predictable, and they last a lifetime. The one entity we teamed it with was the US ski team, and that helped them significantly build and underscore certain brand qualities and attributes. At the same time, we were able to leverage then President Jimmy Carter's brother, who was a little bit of a notorious brat. So they launched a vehicle called the Brat, bi-drive recreational all-terrain vehicle. And Jimmy's brother was the beer drinking boy in the back of the Brat. And that resonated really well in certain states and parts of the country. Then I moved on within that agency. to build out different practices, which happen to be maritime commerce. We launched the first, what we called super carriers. So we started a brand, maritime commerce, which was a really backward industry sector from a marketing standpoint. And we launched these 6 vessels that were built by Fuji in Japan, and they came into service. And we had port events all over the West Coast, the southeast, and up the coast to Newark. We went to the Panama Canal to film the first supercarrier going through the canal, and there was 6 inches to spare on either side of the vessel, so it became quite a nice network news story. That was some of the differences, working into industry sectors that hadn't done certain things and trying to come up with fresh new approaches. I worked with a lot of General Foods at the time before it was acquired by Kraft. We had a whole range of brands like Post cereals and Kool-Aid and Country Time, and Sanka decaffeinated coffee. And what we did with those brands was really adopt and embrace a methodology of course-directed marketing. So a lot of what these brands had was massive brand recognition, but we had to find ways to incentivize people to purchase and repeatedly consume those products. And so we did some amazing things with state and national parks, where people could get into those parks if they brought in proofs of purchase. We had a 3-ring circus that went around 16 state fairs, and we put an incentive there. You could bring your canister labels and your envelopes and redeem them for free admission to the circus. We did a similar thing for inner city kids for swimming pools, beat the heat. Lots of fun things. But again, there was always a cause dimension. We did a whole big tie-in with the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. I did stuff that targeted senior citizens with Jack LaLanne, who's infamous fitness personality, famous for his little witticisms, 10 seconds on the lips, a lifetime on the hips. And we did a lot with John Denver, again, national parks, things like that. What I was doing was finding ways to take brands, associate them with certain experiences that were beneficial and positive for those brands, because in some cases the inherent qualities of those products weren't quite what you'd want them to be. So you have to find ways to hug the right kind of cause. And in this case, it worked out well. And then I moved to Silicon Valley, which was the Wild West. It was the frontier of innovation and entrepreneurship.
What would you say is the overarching trick for a successful campaign? If you had to look at all these campaigns, is there like one thread that you always come back to as a go-to? If you don't have this in a campaign, it'll fail. Or if you have this in a campaign, it will always do well.
Well, I think you've got to really figure out what's going to resonate. Be customer-centric on the B2B side as well as on the B2C side. You've got to come up with things that people are going to covet and want and desire. You've got to inspire desire. It's ingenuity, not conformity, is really clear. And I like to think about marketing invention, not convention. People do annual plans. They repeat the same tactical mix of spend. They don't originate new stuff. They don't refresh their brand. They don't keep their brand relevant culturally, experientially. Probably one of the best brands for doing that is Nando's, which is very well known in South Africa, has expanded globally, but they are a wonderful brand that keeps current with things that are what's in the news, particularly things that they can parody. So the idea here is you got to keep your brand on message. You got to clearly define the essential element that makes your brand distinctive, easy to use, or relevant. And you've got to focus in on campaigns that reinforce and underscore that, just the way we did with Avis and We Try Harder, where every single person in that organization had to be an echo chamber for the promise.
So if we had to look at all your campaigns, what is the campaign or campaigns that stand out in your mind as some of the best campaigns you've worked on with the greatest success, and why was it successful?
I think that the one that I consider to be our most notable was when I took on Michael Dell and his company at that time was called PCs Limited. Now it's Dell Computer. So Michael Dell was a very talented, very bright, multi-dimensional person who you could tell right from the get-go was going to be a winner. And at the time that I took on his account, PCs Limited was the name of his company. He was mail order company selling direct response, build to order computer systems, mostly for high performance usage, science, research, game playing. But he would build stuff to order in his dorm room. And we scaled his business from 60 million to 600 million over a 5-year period and took him public. And also during that time, rebranded PCs Limited to be Dell Computer and took on two of the heaviest brands out there, both IBM and Compaq, both of which sold through dealer channels. So we were actually disintermediating the dealer, and we were evidencing why it's better to buy direct, where the manufacturer builds products specifically to your needs, delivers it very quickly and rapidly. So configure to order and deliver it, and also knows more about your business environment, what your needs are, and is more, obviously, more smarter about how the systems work and how they can be adapted and modified and customized for your needs. Whereas dealers typically at the time struggled to have educated personnel doing customer service. So we were up against, and we positioned Michael as a very pugnacious CEO figure with lots of points of view. So we wanted him to make news, and we wanted him to pick on the deficiencies of the dealer channel. And we did that very successfully. And other companies that were competing with Dell in the mail order direct response business, like Gateway and others, didn't survive, but Dell did, survived and thrived. And that's because Michael is a brilliant strategist and also a very smart operator. So that was probably, from a continuity standpoint, really an interesting ride. There was another ride that I thought was rather interesting, which was another early stage company back in Silicon Valley called Eagle Computer. Eagle was an out of the box system that you fired up and you could use it right away. In those days, ease of use was not a hallmark of a lot of computer companies. This company did very well, and we were taking them public. And on the day the IPO went live in New York, the CEO of the company happened to be out. He just bought a red Ferrari, and he unfortunately took it to too high speeds, and unfortunately he was killed in a road accident in his new vehicle. So on the day, we had to rescind the offering and then recover and reposition the company and evidence the depth and strength of the management team and the continuity of the business. And then we were able to reissue shares, and in fact, were successful. But that was probably the most momentous event I've had to deal with when it comes to future of the business and, of course, wealth of a lot of people involved in that.
You founded the CMO Council about 2 decades ago. How did the CMO Council get started 20 years ago?
2000 era, there was the dot-com bomb and the whole implosion of early stage companies that were all internet-based, internet-driven, big promises, and almost anything could be transferred to the internet. So at that time, companies, the stock market values were escalating. Everybody had great glee in terms of their growth and value of the shares in different companies that were internet driven or based. And then, of course, everything downturned, and there was a massive loss of credibility and confidence. And my agency at the time, we hosted a brand recovery summit for one of our clients as a way to get top brand marketers into one place for discussion. And this was in Silicon Valley at the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay. That was back in 2001. I was able to get a lot of CMOs from major tech players that had been clients of mine or people I knew. HP and Sun and Intel and so on were all represented there. And we had a dinner the night before the summit event happened. These folks had never met their peers. So they never convened. They didn't know them. They hadn't interacted, engaged with their peers. There was a lot of pain and gain sharing. And it was very, very collegial and very congenial. So it turned out, oh, this is something we should do more often, said the CMO of HP. His name was Gary Elliott. And I said, well, great. I'll put my hand up and I'll form a CMO Council, and we'll help push this title in the territory. But you folks will be my advisory board. So we started off more as a tech and telco organization represented by chief marketers, and then has evolved over the last 2 decades or more. We've multiplied our membership base. We have over 16,000 members, 10,000 companies, 120 countries. Members collectively in aggregate control about $1 trillion of marketing spend. So it's a formidable group. And of course, we've opened up and we outreach now to not just chief marketers. We hope to embrace a lot of the folks in the C-suite and a lot of the new titles that have come in that are complementary to marketing and have to be collaborative with marketing. So we have to align and combine with chief data officers, digital officers, chief information officers, chief procurement officers, chief financial officers, customer relationship officers, revenue growth officers. It goes on endlessly, right? So the CMO Council over the years has multiplied, and we're really the peer-powered network is what we are. And it's all about being a global knowledge transfer agent and taking experiential knowledge and sharing it. So all the research we do is based on interactions with our members. We want to audit and assess proficiency, competency. We want to identify areas of weakness and proficiency or competency that needs to be improved. We want to obviously help our CMOs be transformative in how they manage and run their organizations. These are things that the CMO Council has done for over 20 years now.
Why is the CMO role so relevant, and how has it evolved over the last 2 decades in terms of advocacy, title, and territories?
We have evolved marketing, or we are evolving marketing from a cost center to a command center. So everybody looks at marketing as a big sucking sound when it comes to spend, and they don't understand where the value comes from marketing. And for eons, if you look at when I was at agency world, I used to work for Ogilvy and Mather for 5 years, is we would host and we would have a great relationship with our CMOs, and we weren't called CMOs at that time, but the head of marketing leaders were typically wined and dined, and it was all about how we're going to spend your money. And we had great compensation packages, and it was all about ad-driven, all spend-driven. And there was not as much accountability. And so CFOs, CEOs would want to know, well, where is this money evaporating to, and what are we getting in return? So we've always had marketers as being brand compliance officers, really, in most cases, and very much about the brand. But today's CMO is a very different animal. And today's CMO has to be far more diversified in skills, competencies, leadership, and knowledge and understanding of technology and where it's going and how to interact and engage and how to actually make decisions that are data-driven. And that's really the essence today, is data-driven decisioning. And that doesn't matter whether it's a creative execution. You've got to test and validate and be able to verify that that creative approach is resonating with your core audience, and be able to segment and target. It's the age of precision marketing, and also on the fly opportunistic spend, not the annual budgets where you say, here's what we're going to spend. Well, that's not really what I want to hear. The management wants to hear, how am I going to help you blow out inventory or leverage opportunistic situations where you can increase your volume or your sell-through, or manage your inventory levels or your supply chain issues. Marketing today has to be far-reaching in its knowledge of the operations of the business, of the state of its customer and channel relationships, and also using new channels that never heretofore, and new ways to produce and deliver content and interact and engage and identify people who have an intention to purchase, or find ways to drive consumption and use of products through influences and other ways that we never had this before.
Yeah.
So the marketplace has multiplied into this. We see the CMO as a force multiplier in the C-suite. The person who has real intelligence, real insight, real time, not just after the fact, but can actually predict and anticipate, and also understands how to suggest to consumers how to increase the value of their purchase or the profitability of their purchase, because you're astute at knowing what they like or prefer or predisposed to buy. So that's the world today is a very different place. Complexities are huge for CMOs and the challenges are immense, but they've got to align and combine with C-suite peers, and they've got to look through and think about brand protection issues. They got to think about contingency plans. They got to figure out, tariff related issues and things that are going to impact their business, whether it's from pricing or availability of product or sourcing of product or sell through of product. These are all things that marketers today have to be totally intimately involved. It's not just let's spend money on a new campaign, let's modify that brand logo, let's do something fun and cute at trade shows. No, none of that stuff is as relevant today as showing that you're impacting the value of the business.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few things that you hit on there that I can echo. And like one of the things is where marketing has to always be involved. I've been in organizations where marketing is the last to come to the table in terms of once the product's created, then they only call in marketing. Marketing should have been at the table before the product was developed so that you know and can put in your feedback if you think that that's going to even work or if there's market demand for that. And equally, in terms of you were talking about CMOs have to be more than just marketers. They have to actually be the internal storytellers to sell their concepts internally to the broader audience within the business itself. And in terms of budget spend, I also think it's quite important. I never ask for budget, I ask for investment. I've found that using the term investment versus spend seems to land better because then they seem to think and understand they're investing into this project. Yeah, those are my takes on that.
I mean, today it's defining measures and metrics, and everything is performance-based, performance-driven. Even compensation today for agencies is based on campaign effectiveness. And I think, what we're seeing is a lot more advanced tools and platforms for tracking and measuring the impact of campaigns and redirecting the investment, as you say. It's not just saying here's where we want to be. It's got to be very adaptive today, very opportunistic, and you've got to have real-time insight to be able to do that. So business intelligence, market intelligence, and spend intelligence is all part of that equation. Today's CMO is sitting there, as I say, the force multiplier within the C-suite. Now, without a doubt, a large percentages of our marketers are waiting tables. They are not in the kitchen, they're not defining what's on the menu, and they aren't even sometimes preparing the foods. So the products that are served aren't necessarily the right product or for the right market or for the right audience, and they don't have the influence to be able to amend that. So they are seen as waiters and waitresses. That's their role. So it's not a good situation in certain countries and types of company.
I call it the just make it look pretty department.
But there's no real togetherness there when it comes to strategy and business planning and revenue, particularly when it comes to revenue strategy. I mean, growth strategy, you got to look at a lot of facets of your business to be a valued growth strategist. And that's what CMOs have got to do. So we've actually created something called the Growth Officer Council, and that's an adjunct organization. And there are about 30,000 now titles of chief revenue, chief growth, chief business development, commerce, commercial strategy officers. They all fall into that bucket of revenue and growth, and sales, of course, is part of that equation. And today you've got to have people that are super savvy about channels and not selling direct, although obviously e-commerce has enabled that to happen. But there's still a valuable indirect marketplace, and you've got to know how to actually localize, customize, and produce content that's usable for them, individualize the content that they have to sell into different vertical markets or sectors where they have domain expertise. And this is not just cookie cutter stuff, not just promoting the same old, same old. This is now automating the delivery of content that is modified and adapted for different cultures, different countries, different customer types. The task there of a CMO is massive.
Where is the strategic focus for the CMO Council today, and what value does it deliver to its members worldwide?
The strategic focus of the council, again, is to delve into next and best practices, to take experiential knowledge and multiply the value of that, preserve experiential knowledge as we're seeing more people migrate out of the workforce. We are also seeing a huge number of fractional CMOs come into the workforce, and these fractional CMOs, interim CMOs, have a lot of value to deliver, particularly because they're plug and play, and you can place them into situations where there's no need for a lot of ramp up time, onboarding time. So the CMO Council will continue to be the voice of the strategic role of the CMO. We will explore many different avenues that have to do with organizational structure, leadership, operational efficiencies, new approaches, new creative directions. There are many new ways to produce and deliver content, which is also going to be a big challenge for CMOs. Again, how they spend, how they automate, how they increase the efficiency and predictability and profitability of their campaigns. These are all things we will continue to do in association with C-suite members. And to that end, we obviously have an end game around trying to target new emerging functional leadership in the organization that have to do with things like information security, compliance, risk and liability management, access control, things that are important, data protection, brand protection. All of these things today are adjunct areas of marketing and require a lot more interaction and collaboration between functional leaders.
Yeah, there's quite a few roles now that are coming into place that have to support CMOs. There's all these new roles popping up, and I'm sure CMO Council will be delving into all of that shortly. So that brings me up to some initiatives. Could you elaborate on things like Growth Officer Council and Business Performance Innovation Network?
Yeah, the Growth Officer Council is a new endeavor, and we have a very active LinkedIn group, lots of content. We have something called the growthguidancecenter.com, and we talk about mapping routes to revenue, which is what we're trying to do. And we talk about, growth engineering. Now, growth engineering, by our definition, is really looking at where and how you can make money in many different ways, whether that's looking at your product line, looking at diversifying or repurposing your products, looking at business partnerships and alliances, looking at new geographies, looking at new channels of delivery or integration, new partnerships, looking at this as part of what a CMO's mandate should be, with, in many cases, the chief sales officer, if that is what they have. Some organizations have really combined sales and marketing into growth and revenue, and we want to be ahead of the game. And that's why we've launched this entity called the Growth Officer Council. We also have another entity called the Business Performance Innovation Network. Now, that was formed 10 years ago, and that was all focused on what we call enterprise change agents. These are people that are the tall blades of grass in the enterprise. They typically are the ones that are innovators. They typically have innovation as their kind of reference point, and they're looking at technology, or they're looking at ways to improve profit and performance with automation and migration and change management and process improvement and process reengineering. So there's about 50,000 people with titles in and around that domain area. And that's who we target with the Business Performance Innovation Network and the kinds of programs we do there. For example, we just launched the results of a big study where we had 200 functional leaders across major billion-dollar plus companies respond to a survey on how they rated the readiness and preparedness of their data for Gen I implementation. And of course, that's critical to that because there's still a lot of complexity to Gen I embrace, and there's a lot of frustration, and there certainly is already a lot of failure. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing that kind of cross-pollinate across functional leadership areas.
So to be clear, the first one is about almost like user manual guides for CMOs and people in those marketing lead roles. And the other one is more about processes and technology. Does that sort of sum it up? And I just want to touch on, you said, there are lots of organizations who are joining marketing and sales together. I just want to echo that. I think marketing and sales should always be together. There's no point one person creating the leads and then just chucking them over the fence, not knowing if that's landed or not. And equally, sales are the guys that are on the ground talking to the people that you're trying to get at every day. That information should be fed back into marketing so you can spew that back at people and use their own conversations and their own words back at them again, right?
Well, I think one of the biggest misnomers about sales and marketing is that the view is that salespeople know the customer. That's not true. In many cases, they don't know the customer, and marketing needs to help them get the introduction and the pre-sale conversational ignition going. The problem with a lot of sales folks is they are good at writing orders, but they're not particularly good at cultivating and converting. The sales and marketing people need to step into that vacuum, quite honestly, particularly today where you have vast amount of data that you can actually identify prospects. You first of all have corporate buying organizations, you've got account-based marketing, you've got to have really sophisticated strategies for land and expand within large corporate entities. You've got these multi-brand companies that have multiple divisions, each of their own line of business. There's changes every single day in those organizations that are going to impact who buys what and when and how. And these are things that marketing has to provision. The pre-sales intelligence, they've got to have very, very sophisticated systems for trolling and seeing what are buyers, and there are buyers of all titles and areas of responsibility in today's corporation. And group buying, particularly younger generation group buying, is different today than it used to be. So those kinds of things marketing has to drive and populate and fuel the sales ignition process, right? You've got to be able to turn over that engine and have to have a reliable way of firing up the engine. And marketing's got to be in on the front end, and they've got to define and map directionally where sales resources need to be allocated and where channel opportunities. And most channel people look at their vendor relationships, they feel like, mostly all the good leads are kept for internal salespeople, and we get all the dregs, right? So there's a lot of challenges to the integration of sales and marketing and defining who does what, and actually targeting not just one person, because it's not a one-person purchase decision today.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. You need to be looking at who's influencing those people making those final decisions. And to your point, especially in the big orgs, it's not just one person making that decision, it's a whole team, right? Beyond your professional achievement, your journey offers quite valuable lessons. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout your career?
Well, I think number one, you've got to know the marketplace and the customer, and really get behind perception into reality. I think a lot of people make decisions based on their own self-interest or their own experiences, right? And one of the things I've learned over the last 20 years as running the CMO Council is I've had the opportunity to cross borders, to cross boundaries, to look at all the different marketplaces that are out there, look at all the new innovation, the ingenuity around how you create customer community in these other markets, and some of the invention, inspiration that you get from looking at what other countries and other geographies and other cultures are doing when it comes to marketing. And they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, but they've become very adept at finding new ways to connect and engage. And so I think from my standpoint, the inspiration I get from traveling all over the world, interacting with senior marketers and seeing what they're doing, how they're doing it, it's been a revelation. That's why I find, I can go to APAC, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and I can learn every single day more about how to deal with the complexity of connecting with consumers and business customers around the world.
How do you see the future of marketing? You've just done 5 decades. What do you see happening in the next decade or two?
Higher velocity of operation, higher velocity of data utilization, higher velocity of return on investment. Everything is multiplying. We're talking about speed, agility, adeptness. That's really what you've got to be good at. And I think we're right in the thick of a very good example of when you have complete market upheaval. I mean, absolute global market upheaval, even worse than COVID, then is what's happening today.
With the whole AI thing?
Well, AI combined with tariffs. I think tariffs is what's creating tension. It's creating tension in the stock market. It's creating unpredictability of business. It's actually impacting relationships. It's impacting sourcing. It's impacting product offering, product availability, product pricing. It's impacting programs and spend. It's impacting promotion. You're going to see, this is a very bad time right now because marketers have a hard time predicting businesses and have a hard time predicting. Retailers have a hard time predicting. They've got to protect their customer relationship. They've got to try to absorb, but it is not a stable time. So what do you have to do? You have to become very adept. You have to be smart, and there are obviously, you've got to move sources of supply. You've got to figure out ways around where you're going to have those, but that's still a moving target because nothing's solidified. So when nothing is solidified, it becomes more problematic from a planning and marketing standpoint. So you don't know what your Christmas decorations are going to be priced at. You don't even know if you're going to have those Christmas decorations in time for year-end season. And if you do have them, they may not be what they used to be, and they may be made in a different place.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is your suggestion just move fast, pivot as quickly as you can, or hold your breath?
Yeah, marketers have got to be right in the thick of this.
Yeah.
And because it has reputational issues, it has brand credibility issues, it has customer continuity issues, business continuity issues. There are businesses that are going out of business. It has financial implications. You cannot fund at the level that these products are now going to cost. I mean, we see, business failure is going to become a real reality here. What you used to get at Walmart and Costco is not going to be quite the same as it used to be. And so what are all of these small businesses doing to survive and thrive? COVID was different because actually consumption went up. People were consuming products at home that they hadn't ever consumed before. So it opened up a big opportunity. It enabled home delivery, it enabled new mode of distribution, and it also impacted demand. Now, this is actually not impacting demand. This is actually The problem with this indecisive environment we're in is mitigating. People are either going to defer or they're going to redirect or they're going to look at other options.
Um,
And nobody likes that.
Because that predictability element is out the window now, and it makes
Right.
people
I mean,
comfortable.
even with the best data, you can't predict what's going to happen in
No.
this world today as it is currently.
I always say life is what happens while you're busy making plans.
Yeah, exactly. So we are really in a rare moment. When you say where are we going in the next decade, I think it has to be around. We've got to be able to plan for this. So plan for any and every eventuality and have simulations and scenarios. Nobody would have predicted this situation. Well, maybe they would have, but not to the degree that it's manifested itself currently.
What advice would you give aspiring marketing professionals aiming for a leadership role, a CMO role?
Get a really well-grounded exposure to all aspects of business.
Mm.
And you don't have to go through a classic communications, marketing, training program. Today, it's about understanding logistics, understanding information systems, understanding technology deployment, understanding all facets of mobile and e-commerce interaction. So today's marketer cannot be a one-dimensional communicator. It can't be just focused on creativity. You actually have to be operationally smart about business. And the more exposure, the higher your credentials, the more credentials you have in different facets of managing and running businesses, because I believe firmly good CMOs make great CEOs. So if you're a good CMO, you can be a great CEO, because a lot of CMOs are not great CEOs because they
Yeah.
don't have marketing. Marketers, if they are marketers in the true sense of the word, bring immense value. Unfortunately, only 5% of publicly traded companies have marketing leaders on their boards. It's
Oh,
shameful.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they'll always rather have an accountant or a lawyer or a financial maven. And those people are conservative. They're out of touch. They don't have any ingenuity or ideation capabilities. They're not going to challenge the board to think out of the box. Marketers do. Good marketers.
I think that's part of the problem with the marketers, isn't it? In those kind of C-suite environments, is that they are the challengers, and that's not always valued
100%. All right.
because it ruffles feathers and sometimes treads on egos, right?
Yeah, no, I served on the board of Travel Zoo, and that CEO, I was obviously a change agent, agitator in board meetings, and he would say, "Oh yeah, Donovan," and he's German, and he wanted everything to be the way it always was, and everything was predictable. And he says, with Donovan, everything he proposed, we always did, but 5 years later.
So it's funny you say that because I worked with some Germans, and I said, "Why are we doing this event?" And the answer was, "We've always done it." And I said, "Well, that's not the reason to keep doing it. Is it bringing ROI? Well, we don't know." Well, why are we doing it? You need ROI. We don't just go to an event to make ourselves feel good.
Very change-resistant culture.
Yeah. So
And
yeah.
the British are the same way. They're very change-resistant.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that is why marketers get kicked out of C-suite, because they agitate. But I'm a firm believer in all my teams that I've recruited and built my own teams is I have a very diverse team. I have a quiet person. I have somebody that will always challenge me and potentially irritate me because they will challenge my biases. And that's good. And you've got to listen to everybody. You can't agree with everybody, but you have to listen and take that all in. To your point, your guy 5 years later, he did what you said, but he listened, though. He must have listened at some point. Thank you very much. I thought that was really insightful, and I learned so much. One question left for you. What's a book or resource that you found valuable in your career?
Well, that's a good question. The most recent one I just had an interview with was the author of Red Marketing, RED, and that is co-authored by the CMO, Greg Creed. He was actually the CEO of Taco Bell and CEO of Yum Brands. And he wrote a book all about the essence of a brand. And he was talking about what I mentioned earlier, relevance and distinction. And so I thought that was rather handy. But there are a lot of books out there. David Ogilvy's written a lot of books that people think are classics. The trouble with textbooks is they're out of date the day they're published. You can't just rely on a book. And the trouble is marketers have relied too heavily on books. And what we're trying to be is disruptive to book publishers because our content is more consumable. We have high velocity delivery of content. We're a factory of content, and it's all based on real world, real time issues, challenges, problems, complexities. So my view of books is, yeah, we have a lot of them. There's hundreds of marketing books, but I don't rely on it because oftentimes the people who write those books are not necessarily practitioners. I'm a very practitioner-centric person. I want to learn from other people's experiences and failures and successes. And books do that, but they're dated. And you can't explore them as much as you can if you're talking to the person who experienced them.
Yeah.
So we have thousands of people who are doing things every day that we can learn from. Most folks today, they don't want to read a book. They want a video segment. They want a short.
They want what we're doing. They want a
They want
podcast.
an infographic. It's not sit down there and schlep through a book.
No. They want quick, usable bits of content.
It's immediate gratification stuff. And they'll only remember one thing anyway. So, you give them too much, they're on overload.
Yeah. I always say that. I always say, whenever we do an email or whenever we do a campaign, I go, one story, one message, that's it, nothing more, because you can't consume more than that. So, yeah, to your point. But so to your point as well, if people go to the CMO Council website, they can find all the latest kind of up-to-date stuff for marketing and CMO tools and
so we have
how-to guides.
Massive archive of content. We have hundreds of reports, white papers, short form video segments. So we've got a bunch of thought leadership stuff from third parties, as well as all our own members and all our own campaigns. It's this. We've got a site that if you're a student, you're a postgrad, or you're doing an MBA, or you're a faculty member, or you're a board member, or you're aspiring marketing maestro, middle level, we have content for you all. And that's really, it's going to be based on real world stuff, and it's not theoretical, it's practical.
So I've found some really cool things on your site already. I've been through it recently, and I can definitely echo that. And just on that, Donovan, if somebody is a CMO and they want to become a member of the council, how do they go about doing that?
Just click, head to cmocouncil.org. There's a membership nav at the top. Hit membership, go in there, join as a basic member. And then if you want to upgrade to premium member, it's $149 a year. So you can subscribe to every little bit of content we have, facts and stats. We've got all these strategic interest groups. We've got about 12 or 14 of them that focus in deep dive areas of marketing. Of course, all the reports and studies we produce, third-party stuff, blogs, and also people who write about marketing or produce podcasts like yourself. Also people we want to serve and support.
And one thing nobody knows about you.
Well, I don't want to share what you don't know about me because then it's no longer a secret.
All right. You don't have to. Well, I have to see your. I have to.
Oh, I've got to find that. Hold on a second. It's right here. And it's the best hat in the world.
What kind of hat is?
It's the Hallmark hat.
The Hallmark hat.
Yeah, it's a brand.
The brand is called Hallmark?
I'm telling you, the amount of feedback I get from people who like my hat, boys and girls, They love my hat for some reason. Don't know why, but it gets positive reviews everywhere I go. And I wear it when I sit down for dinner. If I'm outside, I'm always wearing this hat.
As a CMO, what's your go-to shoe?
My go-to shoes are HOKA shoes. I mean, I wear them all the time.
What are HOKA shoes?
They're just nice, plush, expensive exercise shoes for walking or running or gymming or whatever it is. HOKA is just a good brand, and they've done a great job of disrupting that category and coming
Okay.
up with a lot more innovation in terms of style and color and whatnot. They have a following. There are others that also have been disruptors, and I think in that category where Nike used to reign supreme, there's been a lot of disruption, and Adidas and Puma and others have come in, and they've been more willing to be more, diversify their products, and there's been a lot of new category entrants. And I think Nike, for example, really lost its way with its retail strategy, and shame, actually.
Well, so here, one of my favorite pairs of shoes is On Runnings, especially when I'm doing events. I don't know if On Runnings are big in the States, but they're massive here.
I haven't come across them so much. Yeah.
It's a Swiss brand, and it seems to be any marketer over the age of 40 that does events wears them. Thank you very much, Donovan,
Right.
for
Thank you.
joining the show. It's been really
Next
good.
time I'll wear my hat if you need it.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you. Have a good day.
Right on. Thanks so much for you. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make use of this for sure.
What a great episode. That was Donovan Neale-May. I have to say, this conversation left me thinking differently about what it really means to be a CMO today. What came through clearly in this conversation is that marketing isn't just a department, it's a driving force in the business. It needs to be in the room early, shaping strategy, understanding the customer, guiding growth, not just making things look pretty on the other end. I also loved his point that a good CMO can make a great CEO, but only if they truly understand how the whole business works, not just the campaigns. If you're in marketing or business, I hope you found this episode useful. Thanks for listening to Shoes of the CMO. And if you want to explore the resources that Donovan mentioned, please head over to the CMOcouncil.org. It's a real treasure trove of information for any marketers out there.